My guest today can usually be found getting the party started on her Hits radio show, but she swapped her DJ decks for my pink sofa today, and I'm delighted to be joined by the gorgeous and vivacious Sarah Jane Crawford. How lovely to see you.
To the setting.
We were always bumping into each other around the BBC for years, weren't we?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and it's so nice to see you. So you're a DJ by day, and in the afternoon, evening and early mornings and all the rest of the time, a mum to two little girls.
That's right, they're 3 and 4, 15 months apart.
Yes, gosh.
Yes, so they're very spirited. Don't know where they got that from.
Don't know.
But,
Don't know.
But no, it's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. It's a real juggle. When people talk about the juggle, that's definitely true and real for me. But what's really fun is that I feel like they kind of integrate into my world of my career as well. So, for example, the other day, unfortunately, Summer wasn't very well. She was running a really high temperature. So she came in to Hits with me, sat in the studio. She now has learned how to do kind of like actual radio silence.
Gosh.
Just about.
Gosh, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a live show. We did.
Yeah.
It took me longer to pre-record my normal shows that it would normally, maybe take less time. But yeah, so she's kind of from a very young age been, she probably doesn't remember life without seeing, the Hits radio logos and different things like that. So yeah, it's fun.
But definitely, you take very seriously this idea of being a role model of, making sure that your girls fulfill their potential, but somehow to shepherd them through all of the pressure that for some reason in 2025 seems to me to be stronger on girls than it's ever been. I mean, the wonderful Kate Winslet saying, see that picture of me? I never looked like that. It's been, CGI'd, computers made me look thinner. I've been lit. I was 3 hours in makeup. Somebody was holding my neck with a staple behind, I never looked like that, even at the moment that the picture was taken. And yet somehow the message isn't filtering down to little girls who think that they've got to look like a combination between a sort of Disney princess and a supermodel, and they're only little, and they also think they've got to be slim and they've got to be a certain kind of way, and that's something that you feel very strongly about doing your best to protect them from.
It's such a tricky one to navigate. Like even things like the weighing scales in the bathroom, like Summer thinks it's a foot measurer, so she'll go, I'm going to measure my feet. I'm always constantly thinking about things that could impact them from a very young age, and hair was one of them. So, for example, when I was pregnant with Summer, it was very much in the middle of my journey of wanting to transition into natural curls. I'd been chemically straightening my hair for years from teenage, and my poor mum, in the 80s, we'd go round kind of like Brixton looking for hair products and stuff, and then by the 90s I went rogue and I decided I was going to start chemically straightening my hair, which is, like many women of colour, straightening their hair. About 90% of black women have chemically straightened their hair in their time. And so I did that for years and years. And then in 2020 lockdown, it was like the perfect storm of, I obviously, became pregnant and therefore what was worrying about products that I was using and how toxic they were. And then I also thought, I'm about to have a girl. I really, she may have curly hair. I don't want her to think, why is mum not happy with herself? Why is she always straightening her hair? So that was like one element of me wanting to instill within them real self-confidence.
Just talk a little bit about the significance of the hair situation.
Yeah.
Because if you are, as you say, a woman of colour, you absolutely get it. If you're not, you may never have even thought about it.
Of course.
You may not even consider, what's the kind of hair legacy I'm passing on to my daughters. So the heat was on. I mean, Angie Greaves, the wonderful playwright and comedian, she I remember her talking to me and doing a really great sketch about being black and a little girl and wanting to have hair that sort of flipped around.
Yes.
And I think she said she put, a tea towel on her head.
Yeah.
And she sort of flipped the tea towel around to of mimic the feeling of sort of Caucasian hair.
It's so significant that what you say there is so interesting, because I think that growing up, there were a couple of people I loved, like Nina Cherry, for example.
Yeah.
And there are a few, women of colour that I would really look up to. But ultimately, especially in the framework of like Disney princesses, is very much that aesthetic, that beauty aesthetic of like the long, hair that's synonymous with like European or Caucasian hair.
Yeah.
So like with my girls, for example, I mean, things have massively changed now, and there is a lot more kind of like diversity in the world of what is represented as like the Disney princess, for example. But like I will always, try to expose my girls to a lot of that, and then also really kind of just encourage them to understand that they are beautiful the way that they look, and actually beauty doesn't is not like a cookie cutter, one size fits all, and you don't have to have like, you know, long flowing hair and actually beauty. And that was one of the reasons why me kind of really wanting to breathe life back into my afro hair was so important. Ironically, Bonnie's hair is kind of like quite straight, but funnily enough, she'll always say, my hair's curly, isn't it, Mum? So then I have to be careful that I'm not making her feel like, you know, she's not perfect the way that she is. It's a real minefield. But I do think it's interesting, that whole idea of thinking that hair that is deemed professional or beautiful
I was just going to
has
say,
to be long and flowy.
because it wasn't only about what's beautiful, was it? It was also about what's kind of deemed acceptable in the workplace, socially. So women of colour were kind of almost, they felt forced to have a, you know, straighten your hair, chemically straighten it, wear a weave, wear a wig, whatever it is, when you go to work, because there's only one acceptable look, and it looks too casual, too real, too natural, too unacceptably uncorporate.
Well, it's
you know, to have your real hair, your natural hair.
And there's been actual cases of like hair discrimination, and so, for example, once a year there's something called World Afro Day, where I've worked on, you know, we actually went to the House of Parliament. I took Summer along to Parliament, and
that's
the whole
an amazing
idea,
thing to do with your little girl. Wow,
it was an amazing experience, and the whole idea was to see if we could tweak the Discrimination Act to include afro hair as a protected characteristic, because statistics show that there is, you know, hair discrimination in the workplace, and sometimes you might risk not getting a job, not getting a promotion if you turn up with like your natural hair, afro, fades, locks, braids, whatever is synonymous with more kind of like African or Afro styles. So for me, it wasn't just about the kind of, you know, the toxicity in the products that maybe I was using before, which we now know also potentially carry a risk for women's health. It was also just the image of wanting to be the real me, you know, so...
And it's funny because I'm nodding in an encouraging manner, but, you know, if anybody would think for one single second I'm really blonde, of course I'm not. I wasn't born blonde at all. I'm a bottle blonde from birth, pretty much. As soon as I could afford the dye, that was it. And, you know, is my hair really straight with a curl? Of course not. It's really very, very, very frizzy and not blonde. So I've had a whole life of, you know, devoting myself to acquiring hair that isn't really at all my natural hair. So I'm nodding away.
And did you feel like the pressure?
I felt that kind of brown, kind of frizzy hair wasn't Diana Dawes, and it wasn't Marilyn Monroe, and it wasn't Jane Mansfield, and it wasn't how I wanted to.
So it was those role models,
Yeah, it was role models. So I kind of get it, you know. And it's taken me a lot of money and hours in a hairdresser's chair to look completely unlike my real self. All this money to get what Ulrika Johnson has naturally. How unfair is that?
But if you went back to the you know, it would go viral. You'd be like, look, this is the real me.
I just don't think. Even in the darkest recesses of my own bedroom, I don't think I'd recognise myself after all these years. And all those bottles of bleach, I think I've been single-handedly keeping the hair bleach industry going. All right, let's get into our first topic now. Now, this affects 1 in 10 women, but with diagnosis taking an average, can you believe this, of 8 years. This is 8 years, in most cases, of really severe pain, at least once a month for several days. 8 years! So do you think endometriosis is taken seriously enough? I would love your thoughts and stories on this one too, please. So do get your calls in now. The number's 0207 862 2222. Now, you were diagnosed with endometriosis. It was in your early 20s. Just in case people watching don't quite know what it feels like, can you describe what it's like?
So for me, the symptoms that I was presenting with was just like excruciating pain, sometimes in a side, very much kind of like reminiscent of like period pains, but like mid-cycle. So you're thinking, why am I getting these pains? And it would cause me to kind of take time off work. At the time, I just graduated with a marketing degree, so I was in that kind of corporate world where, you know, now if something happens, I can kind of, you know, work around it. But at that point, when you're turning up at 9 till 5 and you need to present yourself in a certain way and you're doubled up in pain. So I went for an investigation. I went for a laparoscopy, which is where they sort of do keyhole surgery. I've still got like a little crisscross on my belly button, and they put a camera in to investigate. And I think it's also the same method you can use to what they call clear up the endometriosis, where they would like maybe laser some of it away. But yeah, so it was just a lot of pain, really. And
when you talk about pain, I mean, you use the word excruciating.
Yeah.
People say it's proper agony.
Yeah.
You know, the kind of pain that is so acute, you can't think, you can't concentrate, you can't really speak.
Yeah.
You know, you just want to rock.
Yeah.
You know, you want to be on your own. You've kind of got to be lying down. You might put something hot on it. Was it the kind of pain that if you took 2 paracetamol or 2 ibuprofen, it would take the edge off it, or was it much more severe than that?
There were times when I would take paracetamol or, ibuprofen, and it wouldn't touch, it wouldn't touch the surface.
Really?
It wouldn't, and that was the reason why I decided to investigate. I'm pretty sure that I read somewhere that sometimes things that are like period pains could actually have the same impact as like the pain of a heart attack.
Right.
That is how bad it can be.
So
it takes your breath away.
This is why really we're talking about this today, and you're kind enough to come and talk to me about this, because the idea that it could take 8 years to be diagnosed when you're at that level of agony, that it's interfering not only with your happiness, not only with your private life, but your working life, and every aspect of everything is being kind of dulled by this pain. That seems amazing. And we hear a lot, don't we, about medical misogyny?
Yeah.
That women are given a good pat on the head and told, oh, go on, run along, love, take a couple of paracetamol, get a hot water bottle, you'll be okay. Can you imagine men putting up with that kind of thing for 8 years?
I don't think they have the same pain. Genuinely, I don't think they have the same pain threshold. Well, that's not me just poking fun. I think that's actually true, isn't it? But I also think, for women, it's difficult because we were always trying to seem like we're being really strong. We don't want to look like we're having like women's problems and all of the rest of it. And I think what's really tricky is then trying to maybe communicate that to perhaps your like line manager or someone in HR or another man maybe. So a lot of women are in very sort of difficult situations.
You were so young.
Yeah.
What would you say every month when you were just really doubled up in really acute pain? How would you get that to your HR people or your boss?
Yeah, I was very aware of the fact that, I was saying to them that I needed time off and that it may have been looked upon in a negative way. I'm not sure whether it was or not, but I think even that paranoia that you then have to carry around is not fair, is it?
Not
because,
fair.
But
when they did that laparoscopy, did they identify it pretty
Yeah,
quickly?
so initially it was to identify and diagnose it, and luckily I did get that diagnosis. And then also, with the laparoscopy, you can then go in and remove some of the endometriosis. The problem is it's not a cure.
No.
And so when I had, and I know we're going to talk about, various things in more detail later on.
We're going to bring a doctor in who specialises in this in a minute. So we are taking your calls on this.
Yeah.
We will discuss this with a doctor. And if you have still not been diagnosed or whatever it is, you can ask the doctor. And loads of you are calling in already. We're going to be hearing from you on endometriosis. So they discovered it. They took some away, but it's still not a cure.
So it wasn't a cure. For me, I made certain lifestyle changes, which I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure have alleviated a lot of pain. I'm more or less pain-free now.
Good.
I gave up meat, as you know, I gave up alcohol. These things may or may not have helped, but it's certainly changed things for me. And after having the kids, the funny thing is they sometimes say a cure or a temporary easing of endometriosis comes from being pregnant because you don't have the periods. And when you don't have periods, every time you have a period, it can exacerbate the endo because it then all of the places where you have the adhesions.
I've got to say, people used to say talking about the menopause was taboo. I think endometriosis doesn't get talked about often enough. So we're going to be hearing from you lovely viewers, on the subject of endometriosis right after the break. Were you taken seriously enough? Have you been diagnosed? Are you still struggling to get a diagnosis, let alone treatment? Maybe your wife or your daughter's struggling very badly with this. Do let me know. We're going to be joined by endometriosis and women's health expert, Dr Nitu Bajekal, to answer your questions. So do please get in touch. Endometriosis is what we're talking about first, though. 0207 862 2222. Dr Nitu, first of all, for people who don't really know what it is, what is happening to a woman's body when she has endometriosis?
So it is a very complex condition, affects different women in different ways. But just simply to explain, it is tissue that is very similar to the lining that we shed every month as a period. That grows in places that we don't want to have. So it grows on ovaries, inside the ovaries, on the bowel, on the bladder, in your brain sometimes, in cesarean section scars. It can be mostly in the pelvis, but it can be elsewhere as well. So this tissue, every month, it grows like the lining does, and then when it sheds, it has nowhere to go. So it causes scarring, pain, and bleeding inside, and can leave women with a lot of medical symptoms.
Why does it take so long to diagnose it?
That is a question I have often asked myself and my health professional colleagues, and I think it's multi-layered. The first is because society, we have always dismissed women's problems and periods. We say, I had painful periods, my grandmother had painful periods, so suck it up, my daughter. No, painful periods should never be ignored. Heavy periods, irregular periods. So that's a reason why we sort of normalize painful periods, and so that takes a long time.
But this is much more than just painful periods, and it's not even just at that time of the month. It's kind of as Sarah Jane was saying, in the middle of the month.
Yes, but it can be for different people. So usually painful periods and heavy periods are one of the initial signs. So we often normalize them. The second reason is to diagnose it, we used to previously only be able to do it surgically, which means I'm a keyhole surgeon, I would have to put a telescope in, examine somebody, diagnose it and treat it at the same time. Now that is not available to everybody. Now we have good imaging techniques, ultrasound, MRI, a good sonographer can actually diagnose it. Right. That's another reason.
I'll tell you what, we'll go straight to the phones because so many people want to get in touch. Let's start with Amanda in Somerset. Hi Amanda, thanks so much for ringing. So you were diagnosed in 2021 with endometriosis. How's it going now?
Good afternoon, Vanessa. Good afternoon, everyone. So, yes, I was diagnosed in 2021, very heavy periods, always had heavy periods, was anemic because of it, took iron tablets. Fast forward to early 2022, I had various scans due to so much pain, and I had endometriosis stage 4 on both my tubes on my uterus. I had my right ovary was stuck to my bowel. Long story short, I had a hysterectomy because of it and a bowel shave. They removed both my tubes, my right ovary, my cervix, and obviously my uterus.
Oh my
I had a positive year, pain-free for a year, and Easter last year, in fact, I began to feel pain yet again. I think once you have experienced endometriosis pain, you can't mistake it for anything else. I had an open appointment with my local hospital. I went back for various scans again, and they confirmed that it had grown back again, everywhere again.
Right, Amanda, let's give Dr Nitu a chance to respond to this. I mean, is that unusual? This sounds so extreme.
Yes, this is unusual.
This is unusual.
Most women who will have definitive treatment can actually find quite significant relief, along with the help of, medications as well. We have a new drug now that can help with endometriosis as well. But what is being discussed is quite horrific, actually.
Yes, it sounds dreadful,
so I'm really sorry,
Amanda,
and I hope
really
you'd completed
awful.
your family if you had wanted one, because it can be diagnosed early, and infertility is a real medical symptom with endometriosis.
Oh dear, but what about the future for Amanda, just briefly?
I think if she has more surgery or considers medication with the right endometriosis team, so you need to see a team of specialists, not regular gynecologists, not regular doctors. It's really important. There's help available.
And is it one of these situations where it's a postcode lottery and it really depends on where you live in the country?
Yes, but I am here so that I can help empower women to sort of advocate for themselves, make sure that they are looking up and finding, because we do have patient choice in this country, and so you can ask to be referred to the right specialist by looking them up.
Sarah, Sarah Jane, just hearing about this is just devastating, isn't it?
It's absolutely devastating, and it really breaks my heart when I hear that people have had hysterectomies and things like that.
Yes, a really serious thing. I'm glad we're talking about it, though it's very painful just discussing it. Let's talk to Jean in Kent. Jean, this all started for you when you were 12 years old with very painful periods.
Oh, yes, it was just shocking and such a shock. Luckily, I had a very supportive mother. Yes, I mean, I really went through it, and the blood used to drain from my face when it all started. I could pass out. I could just faint. And, the end result was, just being put to bed with a hot water bottle. And at 12 years old, and continuing that for so long, going to people and asking them for help and support, doctors, and being told, just go away, I have a baby, it's all psychosomatic. But, in the end, we managed, after 10 years of marriage, my husband and I had a beautiful little boy. He was 10 weeks premature, but survived. He's now 6 foot tall. And then I went in and had a complete hysterectomy. It was on the appendix, it was in my nostrils, in my lungs.
Wow.
But, it's so important to keep this subject going for young women.
After the hysterectomy, Jean, were you all right after that, without the pain?
Oh, it was just a miracle. A miracle. I had my life back. I could carry on living, But for young girls to be going through this and not getting the support they need,
Absolutely.
it needs to be
glad
highlighted
you
all
phoned.
the time.
I mean, when Jean says, she was just told, to take a hot water bottle, go
Correct.
to bed. I mean, this is appalling, and it is what they call medical misogyny,
Yes.
isn't it? The women are expected
It is.
to endure things that men wouldn't endure for 10
Never.
seconds. And this is not generalising. This is truth. This is
It's
fact,
absolute
isn't
truth.
it?
Do you think men would have vaginal deliveries the way we put women through? They would always have they've outsourced it to women already. But it is so important to not be dismissed.
Yes.
And my duty as a senior doctor is to educate health professionals, GPs and younger consultants, but also the public, so that you can speak up for yourself. Because, painful periods, heavy periods, not to be taken for granted, not to be just accepted and go away and wait till you want to have a baby. No, women are much more than just, baby producing machines. So.
Right. Let's bring in Jane. Jane's in Lincolnshire. Did you have a hysterectomy, Jane, because of endometriosis?
Yes, I did.
Did you?
I was 28.
Wow.
I had my hysterectomy.
Gosh.
I was 13 when my period started, and they tried various things. I had a very lovely consultant, and in the end, I had the hysterectomy at 28, and it's the best thing I ever had done.
And I hardly can bear to ask you this, but I'm going to. So had you had children before that, or had you had to give up the idea of children completely?
Yes, I'm not maternal minded, but for me, it wasn't a big issue.
Oh, good.
But it was just people's reaction, which, turning around and saying to me, "Oh, you mustn't feel like a woman anymore," which was, the opposite, because I could live my life again. Absolutely. The day after I'd had my operation, the pain had just gone. I had pain from surgery, but it was a different pain.
Jane, in those days when you said to people, "I have endometriosis," did they know what you were talking about? Had they even heard of it?
No. I'd never heard of it until I got it.
Really?
Until I was diagnosed with it. Again, I was told just go home and, everything will be all right when you have children, and this, that and the other, just being palmed off. But luckily for me, I had private health insurance at the time, and when I went privately, that's when they diagnosed me, and through different treatments they tried first, nothing worked, and they did a full hysterectomy, but they took everything.
Well, I'm so glad that you, as you say, have lived your best life, pain-free. It really, it's a happy story. But then Jane wasn't maternally minded, and
Correct.
she's not devastated by not having had children. Many other women would not feel the same about it, would they?
Absolutely. And that is why we do have lots of options, and it needs to be. I want women to know that there are teams of specialists who are actually trained in this. So getting a diagnosis is really what I want people to take away. And also Endometriosis Society, there are lots of good societies that can actually help and support women, because it's important.
So if you feel that you're not getting a proper diagnosis, your GP, either you can't get an appointment at all, which we know happens,
of course.
or when you get there, you're palmed off, or nobody takes you seriously, or you have been referred to a consultant in hospital, but you still think they don't really get it.
Correct.
They're not really helping you.
Correct.
What do you do? How do you advocate for yourself?
So, couple of things. One is you would reach out to, say, endometriosis.org and find people. There are lots of threads now which will tell you this is a doctor in the area who's really good. So I would want people to reach out to such doctors, because you can get that help. You don't have to always go private at all. Yes, private doctors may be a bit better, but not necessarily. The NHS is wonderful. Right. It just takes time, but you have to persist. Your voice is really important.
So effectively, don't be fobbed off.
Don't give up. Don't
be
give
fobbed
up.
off, although that's very difficult, because, doctors, hospitals, it can all be very intimidating.
Yeah. And doctors are intimidating, just by being who they are.
I know.
And so women need to know that, I know what I'm going through. This is my truth. I need to ask for help. It may be that they don't have the time for me, but I will find somebody who has the time for me.
Okay, all right. Let's go to Elizabeth in Leicester. Elizabeth, you are one of the women still suffering. What's going on with you, my love?
So it's not just a period condition. It's an inflammatory disease, so it attaches everywhere in your body. Nobody's really talking about how the psychological effect of being told to just have a baby or just have a hysterectomy. especially for women in their 20s and their 30s. It's not easy to just have a baby.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Sarah Jane, you were telling me just before the show, she was talking to me about this. It's exactly, Elizabeth, what she was saying. You said you felt this ticking time bomb, the pressure, the worry, similar thing.
Similar thing. I actually had a professional tell me that as well, to hurry up, because I'd had a fibroid removed. So they said, you know, you've got all these things, you need to have a baby quickly. And at the time, I was in a relationship that wasn't the right relationship. So I think that's hard. And I also wanted to know, is a hysterectomy the only answer?
No. So a hysterectomy is actually taking out the messenger. It's not really the main reason for endometriosis. And so the ovaries, if you're going to remove anything, it's got to be the ovaries. But then those are the egg-containing sacs, and so fertility would be an issue.
Yes.
So I also want to just highlight that endometriosis is, as Elizabeth said, is not just a pelvic condition. It is a chronic condition. It causes chronic fatigue. It can cause so many other symptoms, including painful sex and infertility. So I don't want people to just go away thinking a hysterectomy is the only answer, but there are other medications. But again, getting a diagnosis first and foremost, because until you have a diagnosis, it takes 10 years sometimes for women to get a diagnosis. They've been told it's normal, go away, come back when you want to have a baby. We want women to change that. Can
you believe that it's 2025 and we're having these conversations?
It is sad.
I am really horrified by this.
It is very, very sad.
I really am. I mean, this is a lovely lunchtime show, and I'm not going to start crusading and walking up and down with a sandwich board, but it isn't right, is it?
It isn't right.
No, but hopefully conversations like this will maybe plant the seed for women to become their own advocate, I think. You know, and maybe also, like I'd say, diarising symptoms.
Totally.
And even if you can't advocate for yourself, I say to people, if, you know, get a friend, like a big mouth friend like me, or somebody who can then be there with you in an appointment and say, no, actually, we want to know.
Also, you can do things to help yourself. So there are things with diet, eating an anti-inflammatory diet, so really trying to focus on more plant foods, trying to make sure that
Jane's done all of this, haven't
you?
She's done it with great meticulousness.
I don't actually have any pain anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I did stop drinking alcohol and I did give up meat. Now, I can't say that is a definite reason, but for me, in my experience, I don't suffer with pain
All these things help, but it's not enough for everybody. So some women will still need medication, some women will still need fertility treatment, some women will still need their hysterectomies and surgery. But we have got a lot of things. It's being aware how to reach that. And yes, getting a friend to come along and ask those questions, you know, really getting health professionals also to take women seriously.
I'm so glad you came in, honestly, and I really am, because I think it's a massively big deal.
It is.
Absolute acute agony for several days of every month, for years
and it's not just the period time. You can be in pain throughout the month, during ovulation, during intercourse. It is just while passing urine.
Well, I hope we've been of some help. I think you've been fantastic and incredibly honest, all of you. Thank you so much to Dr. Nitu, and thank you for sharing your stories with us. Don't forget, later on in the